That evening, the air carried a gentle warmth, the kind that made every sound on the water seem louder and more alive. I remember the way the lake rippled under the fading sun, its surface reflecting streaks of orange and pink. It was supposed to be nothing more than a quiet ride, a way to escape the noise of the house and the weight of everyday life. The boat rocked gently as I stepped inside, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. He rowed steadily, his face calm, his eyes scanning the horizon as though the world beyond the water held secrets only he could read. I watched him silently, torn between the comfort of his presence and the unease of what I was beginning to feel. The silence between us wasn't heavy, though, it was almost soothing. Each stroke of the oars echoed softly, mingling with the calls of distant birds. As the boat drifted further from the shore, the world behind us seemed to fade. The chatter of family, the obligations, the countless expectations, they all shrank into nothingness. Out here, it felt as though we were suspended in a place where time had paused, where no one could see us and no one would ask questions. That thought alone stirred something inside me I wasn't ready to name. He spoke then, his voice low but steady, asking if I was comfortable, if I liked the water, if I wanted to stay out until the stars appeared. I answered softly, careful to keep my words short, because my thoughts were too tangled to share. Every gesture of his, every glance that lingered a second too long, seemed to draw invisible lines across my heart. I reminded myself that this was wrong, that I had no right to let such thoughts grow. And yet, sitting there with nothing but water around us, I felt strangely free, as though the boundaries that defined right and wrong had blurred. I found myself laughing at his quiet jokes, leaning closer when the wind grew cooler, and watching his hands on the oars more intently than I should have. When he noticed the chill in the air, he offered me his jacket. I hesitated, but the way he held it out left me no choice. The fabric was warm, carrying the faintest trace of his scent, and as I pulled it around me, I felt an intimacy that no one else could see but that I could not ignore. My pulse quickened, betraying me in ways I prayed he could not notice. The sun sank lower, the sky deepening into shades of violet and blue. The stillness of the water mirrored the quiet storm inside me. Part of me wanted to turn back, to return to the shore before anything shifted too far. But another part longed for this moment to stretch on endlessly, for the night to hide us away in its shadows. He stopped rowing for a while, letting the boat drift lazily. The silence between us deepened again, only this time it wasn't soothing. It was charged, thick with unspoken words. I avoided his eyes, staring instead at the water, but I could feel his gaze resting on me. It was the kind of look that could unravel everything if I let it. Inside, I battled with myself. Loyalty, duty, promises, all of it clashed with the undeniable pull I felt sitting there with him. Every heartbeat seemed louder in the still night, every breath heavier with meaning. I told myself it was only the magic of the lake, the illusion of being alone together, but I knew the truth ran deeper. When he finally spoke again, his words were softer, almost hesitant. He said he was glad I had come, that he couldn't remember the last time he had felt so at ease with someone. My throat tightened, because I understood exactly what he meant, even though I wished I didn't. I wanted to reply, to tell him I felt it too, but the fear of what those words would mean held me back. The boat rocked gently, the stars beginning to prick the sky above us, and in that fragile space between temptation and restraint, I realized that this ride was no longer just a simple escape. It was the beginning of something far more complicated, something that would demand choices I wasn't sure I was ready to make. The stars scattered themselves across the sky as if they were quietly watching, silent witnesses to the turmoil inside me. The boat drifted in near-perfect stillness now, only the soft lapping of the water against its sides breaking the silence. I sat there with my hands resting on my lap, my thoughts racing in directions I could barely control. A part of me wanted to believe it was nothing, that the weight in the air between us was only in my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. He leaned back slightly, resting the oars across his knees, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Beautiful night," he murmured, his voice calm yet edged with something unspoken. I nodded, not trusting myself to look at him for too long. The way his words lingered seemed to reach past the surface of what he was saying, hinting at everything left unsaid. The air grew cooler, brushing against my skin and raising goosebumps. He noticed instantly, and without asking, shifted closer. His shoulder almost touched mine, and though the space was small, the closeness felt immense. My heart beat faster, betraying me, and I wondered if he could hear it in the silence. I turned slightly away, trying to steady my breath, but the effort only made me more aware of him. I tried to remind myself of the promises I had made in life, the image of loyalty I was supposed to protect. Yet in that moment, all of it felt distant, as though it belonged to another life. Here, in the middle of the lake under the blanket of stars, reality seemed suspended, and I was caught between who I was and who I was becoming. He broke the silence again, this time more directly. Do you ever wish you could just leave it all behind, even if only for a night? His question startled me, not because of its meaning but because it mirrored the very thoughts I had been afraid to admit to myself. I turned to face him, and for the first time that evening, our eyes locked. There was no mistaking it now, the connection was undeniable, dangerous, and it demanded acknowledgement. I swallowed hard before answering. Sometimes, I whispered, the word escaping before I could pull it back. His expression softened, as though he had been waiting for me to say it, and in that instant, the boat seemed smaller, the distance between us shrinking in more ways than one. The temptation hung thick in the air. He reached out, not in a bold way, but gently, letting his hand brush against mine for the briefest moment. The touch was so slight, yet it sent a current through me strong enough to shake the walls I had built around my heart. I should have pulled away, should have drawn a line, but I didn't. Instead, I froze, torn between the pull of desire and the anchor of conscience. The boat shifted slightly with the breeze, and I used the motion as an excuse to move, but instead of retreating, I found myself leaning closer. It wasn't planned, it wasn't thought through, it was instinct. My body and my heart moved faster than my reason could stop them. He noticed, of course, and the look in his eyes deepened, filled with both restraint and longing. He didn't push, didn't demand, he simply waited, as though giving me the choice that could alter everything. That patience was somehow more dangerous than any forceful advance, because it allowed me to step willingly into a space I knew I shouldn't. The night grew darker, the stars brighter, and the silence heavier. Every second felt stretched, pulled tight like a thread about to snap. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the tension, but my voice refused to obey. All I could hear was the sound of my own breathing, quick and uneven, betraying the storm inside me. And then, almost without realizing it, I smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile born from happiness, but one born from surrender. I realized in that moment that I had already crossed a line. Whether or not anything more happened, the truth was clear, I had let myself feel, let myself lean into something forbidden, and there was no undoing it. He smiled too, faintly, as if he understood exactly what had just happened between us, even without words. The boat continued to drift, carrying us further from the shore, deeper into the quiet embrace of the night. And though neither of us moved closer or said more, everything had already changed. I sat there, wrapped in his jacket, my heart tangled in conflict, knowing that when the night was over, the world would not look the same again. The boat rocked softly under the vast sky, and though the night was calm, my thoughts churned like restless waves. I kept my eyes fixed on the stars, afraid that if I turned to look at him again, the walls I had left would crumble completely. Yet, even without meeting his gaze, I could feel it, his presence pressing against me in the silence, a quiet gravity pulling me closer with every passing second. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, that nothing had really happened, that we were just two people sharing the same space. But the truth clawed at me, this was no longer innocent. I had already given away pieces of myself in the way I had smiled, in the way I had allowed his hand to brush mine, in the way I had let the night swallow up my resistance. He shifted slightly, leaning back against the wooden edge of the boat, his posture more relaxed now. But there was something in his stillness, a kind of waiting, like he was letting the moment decide for both of us. My heart raced, every beat echoing the unspoken question that hung between us. "Are you scared?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, almost blending with the night breeze. I hesitated, not sure how to answer. Scared of what? Of him, of myself, of the truth I could no longer deny. "Yes," I finally whispered, my voice trembling, "but I don't know if it's the kind of fear that keeps me away, or the kind that pulls me closer." He didn't reply right away. Instead, he looked out over the water, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the oars again though he made no move to row. When he finally turned back to me, his eyes carried something fierce, something that both frightened and thrilled me. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "fear is the only proof that what you're feeling is real." Those words struck deep, and I found myself speechless. Real. That was the part one couldn't fight. Whatever was happening here, however wrong or complicated, it was real. And the more I tried to silence it, the louder it became. The boat drifted near the middle of the lake now, far from the shore. The lights of the house in the distance were faint, like distant memories, while the stars above seemed sharp, almost close enough to touch. I wrapped his jacket tighter around myself, but it wasn't the cold that unsettled me, it was the heat of temptation burning from within. I thought about everything waiting for me on the other side of this night. A life built on vows, expectations, and appearances. A life I was supposed to protect at all costs. And yet here I was, craving a freedom I hadn't felt in years, drawn to someone who should have remained nothing more than a shadow in my story. He leaned forward slightly then, his eyes searching mine as if asking for permission without words. My breath caught, my body tense, every instinct torn in two. I wanted to say no, to push him away, to retreat back into the safety of what I knew. But the truth was, a louder part of me wanted to let go, to finally feel seen, to finally surrender to the storm that had been building for so long. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered, almost to myself. His hand moved slowly, carefully, resting near mine but not quite touching. Then don't decide now, he said gently. Just be here, just for tonight. Forget the rest. The simplicity of those words disarmed me. Forget the rest. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to imagine what that would feel like, to let go of all the weight, to exist only in this space where no one else could judge or demand. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and yet it was exactly what I longed for. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air, trying to steady myself. When I opened them again, he was still watching me, waiting, giving me the choice. And though I still hadn't spoken, my silence spoke louder than any words could. The boat swayed gently, and in that fragile balance, I realized something irreversible had already happened. Even without a touch, even without crossing further lines, I had already betrayed the world I belonged to. My heart had stepped into forbidden territory, and no amount of restraint could erase that truth. I looked away then, back toward the faint lights on the shore, a sudden ache spreading through me. I knew that no matter what happened next, the night would leave a mark one could never undo. Whether it became a secret kept forever or a fire that consumed everything, this moment would stay with me. And as the boat continued to drift in the stillness of the lake, I felt the weight of both fear and desire pressing down on me, knowing that the choice I made before the dawn would change everything. The night deepened until the lake was a sheet of darkness, broken only by the shimmer of stars above. The air had grown colder, yet inside me there was no chill, only a restless heat that refused to settle. I sat in silence, every second stretching longer than the last, aware that we had already crossed a threshold, even if no one else would ever know. He rowed again, slow, steady strokes that barely disturbed the water. Each pull of the oars seemed deliberate, like he was buying us time, stretching the night so it would not end too soon. My eyes followed his movements, the quiet strength in his arms, the calm steadiness of his breath. I tried to look away, but my gaze always returned to him, as if pulled by a force I couldn't resist. Are you thinking of tomorrow? He asked softly. The question cut through the night, quiet but sharp. I hesitated. Tomorrow. The word itself was heavy, filled with the weight of responsibilities waiting on shore. I don't want to, I admitted at last. My voice shook, but the truth in it was undeniable. If I think of tomorrow, I'll lose tonight. He stopped rowing, letting the boat drift again. The water carried us slowly, aimlessly, as though even it understood the moment's fragility. He leaned back, studying me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. Then don't lose it, he said. Stay here, in this night. Just us. Those words wrapped around me like the jacket I still wore, warm and suffocating all at once. My pulse raced, my mind a blur. I wanted to fight it, to remind myself of who I was supposed to be, but the battle was already lost. I had given in the moment I chose to stay, the moment I let silence speak louder than reason. He reached for me again, slower this time, giving me the chance to stop him. I didn't. His fingers brushed mine gently, then lingered, intertwining with hesitation at first, then with a quiet certainty. The simple touch sent waves through me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't just a hand in mine, it was a promise, a risk, a confession without words. In that fragile hold, I felt everything I had been missing, tenderness, attention, the kind of connection that made the rest of the world fall away. And it terrified me. I turned my face to the sky, searching the stars for strength, but they only seemed to shine brighter, as if encouraging me to stop resisting. My heart betrayed me with its relentless pounding, urging me forward when my conscience begged me to retreat. The silence between us grew heavier. Every moment seemed poised at the edge of something irreversible. I thought of the life waiting on the shore, the promises, the faces, the expectations. And then I thought of this boat, floating in the middle of nowhere, where no one could see, no one could judge, where for once I could choose for myself. "Do you regret being here?" he asked, his voice careful, almost fragile. I turned to him then, finally meeting his eyes. The question carried more weight than he realized, but the answer slipped out before I could think twice. "No," I whispered, "I don't." His face softened, his eyes searching mine for a moment longer before he let out a breath I hadn't realized he was holding. And then, with no more hesitation, he leaned closer. The boat rocked gently, the night pressing in around us, and I felt myself leaning too, drawn by something greater than reason, greater than fear. I closed my eyes, not to block him out, but to surrender. Whatever happened in that moment, whatever tomorrow would bring, I knew it would change me. This night had already marked me, carved its place into my heart. There was no turning back. When his lips brushed mine, it was not just a kiss, it was the breaking of a dam. The quiet flood of all the feelings I had kept locked away rushed through me, unstoppable, undeniable.
The world outside ceased to exist. There was only the water, the stars, and the two of us. For a long moment, everything was still, and then, as the boat rocked beneath us and the night held us close, I realized that choices made in the dark would demand their price in the light. Tomorrow would come, and with it, consequences. But tonight belonged to us, and as I pulled away just enough to meet his eyes, I knew that no matter how hard I tried to forget, the memory of this night would stay with me forever, an unspoken secret between my heart and the water that carried us.